Alrighty, so Mythic Plus dungeon trinkets added to the Dinar vendor and Mythtrack needing Mythic 12s is a post that was made over on Wowhead, and we have a blue post where Blizzard is announcing that Mythic Plus dungeon trinkets will be available on the Dinar vendor, and Mythtrack trinkets need Mythic Plus 12s to be able to obtain them. So Blizzard created a blue post with a lot of the backlash coming with the current Dinar system. Let me over a little bit, that way you guys can see. We're going to kind of talk about like what's actually changing with the Dinar system, what Blizzard's walking back a little bit, and is this good or bad realistically. So Blizzard basically goes out on the state whenever the Turbo Boost event goes live on May 13th. It will include some additional opportunities for players who prefer Mythic Plus dungeons. The weekly quests that provides puzzling cartel chips will now offer players a choice between killing 4 raid bosses in the Liberation of Undermine or completing 4 Mythic Plus dungeons. Additionally, the vendor will now offer a selection of trinkets from Season 2 dungeons in addition to the previously planned raid items. Cool. Purchasing a Hero Track dungeon trinket or Hero Track raid gear will have no requirements other than currency cost. This means that regardless of how you obtain your puzzling cartel chip, you can exchange them for Hero Track raid gear or Hero Track dungeon trinkets. The Mythtrack dungeon trinkets will also require both the currency and having beaten the timer in all Season 2 Mythic Plus dungeons at plus 12 or higher, having unlocked the Resilient Keystone system. And of course, the Mythtrack raid gear will require both the currency and a victory over the item's associated boss on Mythic difficulty in the Liberation of Undermine. Our goal here is to ensure players who enjoy Mythic Plus dungeons have a way to use this new event to obtain items they may have been chasing for weeks. I'm going to be honest, this is probably the best concession that they could have made given what the system is. I know that for some people, it isn't realistically going to be enough for them. For some people, nothing except for being completely equal with Raiders is going to be enough for some people. But I think that this is probably the best thing that Blizzard was realistically going to do here. And honestly, I think that this was... I'm actually glad that they walked this back. I actually didn't expect them to do anything, but the fact that they are giving a conduit to Mythic Plus players, whereas a similar analog to what Raiders are getting, where they can actually buy these items off of a vendor with these guaranteed effects, is important. Now, what I will say is I think the very rare items are probably the biggest and most slippery slope that you're seeing here, where the very rares kind of have this weird thing where all 20 people in your raid want this item, whether it be Jaster Diamond, whether it be the class trinkets from Neltharion, whether it be the Vault of the Incarnates trinket, the Whispering Incarnate icon, whatever it might be. There are very rare items each and every single season, the Ansarek ring, that your entire raid guild wants. So all 20 players are needing on it, or all people are needing on it in general. And as a result, they also have very powerful cantrip effects or secondary proc effects or whatever that some of these other items don't have. And so, of course, they're going to just basically be BIS for everybody because they're designed to be over budget. I think that that's just the intent by design. And whenever you're creating items that are like that, of course, players who feel like they don't have access to designs because they're purely from Raid are going to be a little bit annoyed. I think, again, I just don't think that the very rare system is maybe the best way of designing the loot in the game just as a whole, and maybe something that Blizzard's going to be looking to rethink in the future. But just in general, I think that this is probably the best thing that Blizzard could be looking to do. So what's going to end up happening is basically Mythic Plusers. If you need a Sephorium Pacemaker, a Signet of the Priory, any of the other trinkets, Mud, any of the other trinkets that you actually obtain purely from Mythic Plus, you can now purchase those, the Tome for tanks as well. You can now purchase those on Mythtrack, assuming that you have all 12s done, which in my opinion is a decent analog to Mythic raiding in general. Now, I don't think it's perfect because I think that there are some bosses like One Armed Bandit, Mugsy, or whatever that are much harder than 12s. And I think that there are some bosses like Vexy that are easier than 12s, but I don't think it's, that's not really super important here. I think it's like an okay analog to be looking to be able to be deterministically purchasing items off of a vendor in this way. And I think that giving Mythic Plus players the ability, even if the trinkets are a little bit worse, for melee DPS, I know some of their BIS trinkets are Signet of the Priory and Sephorium Pacemaker together. And I know for ranged DPS, a lot of their BIS trinkets are like House of Cards and Mug Moxie's Choke. So having these opportunities, though, to be able to purchase trinkets. In some seasons, your best trinket's going to be coming from Mythic Plus. In some seasons, your best trinket's going to be coming from Raid. But the reality of the situation is that having the opportunity to purchase these trinkets is the most important thing here. And I think that that's actually I think I commend Blizzard for actually walking this back and trying to create a system that works for everybody, because I think that one of the bigger complaints was that very infrequently is there a system that actually doesn't benefit you. So say you're like a pure Mythic Plus player, very infrequently does Blizzard create a system that just doesn't benefit you. You know, it might benefit you less than somebody else, but it's not that it won't benefit you at all. I still stand by what I said in the past video, though, that I think the accessibility of Mythic rating is also partially at fault here, where I've seen a lot of comments from a bunch of different people that are like, yeah, I work irregular hours and have just a bunch of life going on, and for me it's really difficult to be able to raid at a level that I would like to, or raid at a level that where I could actually get these rewards. And it's not even that I don't have the skill, but I just don't realistically have the time to be able to carve out where I can, you know, jump in and play 5-6 days a week, but only for an hour or two at a time, and be able to do 13s, 14s, and 15 level keys. And so I still think the accessibility of Mythic rating is something that maybe Blizzard's going to be needed to continue to look at in the future, because that stuff is tough. I mean, it's one of the things that I've seen a lot of common sentiments about is like, there are these very skilled players that just aren't willing to Mythic raid because of the time commitments and accessibility and just what it requires to actually be a Mythic raider. And it's not even necessarily the difficulty, but it's more the logistical stuff that is part of the problem there. So circling this back to the Dinars, I think that this is probably the best compromise that Blizzard was going to come up with. I don't really think that there's much more that you're going to ask for. In regards to this, I think that it's, you know, again, the Jaster Diamond, the best in slots, some of these very rare items that are off of the bosses in raid that are higher value. Of course, they're always going to end up being better just because that's how they are. But just getting a system that is at least, there's like a decent compromise here, I think that that's probably the most fair way of going about it from a Blizzard perspective. And something that I do also want to iterate is, you know, sometimes I'll read these comments where they're like, yeah, we're all second-class citizens. I want you to know that Blizzard, there is no chance in hell that they actually view Mythic Plusers as second-class citizens, and they don't view Mythic Plus as like an in-game pillar. They legitimately do view that as an in-game pillar. Otherwise, they wouldn't have spent so much damn time reworking the system due to feedback and continuing to add things like the 3K IO achievement, or changing up the weekly keys and changing the affixes and completely reworking the affix system. They wouldn't do that if they actually viewed you as second-class citizens. It's more just that they view PvE players in the same bucket together, where it's not just, you know, raiders versus Mythic Plusers, it's raiders and Mythic Plusers combined. And so they have to try to make a system that works for both combined, where a lot of people want to play one or the other, not necessarily always one and the other, especially at the same skill level. And ultimately, I know that it isn't going to always appease everyone, and I know that it's not fair, and the systems aren't equal for both parties involved, because, again, the raid gear is still going to be better. I think that there's a larger question as to why does raid gear necessarily need to be better than Mythic Plus gear. I think that that's something that you pretty in good faith could ask yourself, is like, why does Mythic raid gear just have to be better than Mythic Plus gear? But at the same point, for what we were getting in the system, at least Blizzard listening to feedback and walking back the system, in my opinion, is probably the best thing that we were going to get out of this. And overall, that's it for me today. I just wanted to shout out this announcement that you guys might have missed, talking about Mythic Plus dungeon trinkets being added to the Dinar vendor and needing plus 12s for those. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.